As far as new players versus experienced players, I do tend to focus on more singular experiences where you'll play like a short session, sorry, a short campaign, so 3 to 5, um, 3 to 5 sessions or something like that, rather than on trying to do a big sprawling, you're going to be playing this for 30 years kind of thing. Um, but that said, again, for me, it's more about making sure there's enough variety of setting material than on making sure the mechanics are deep.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies in their diapers, welcome to the Tiberius Show with your host, Tiberius Boy.
That's me, Tiberius.
And welcome to the Tiberius Show today. And I'm your host, Tiberius Boy. And as always, we're looking at various jobs and how they affect the world around us. Now, today's guest is someone who traded in a high-paying tech career to chase dragons, roll dice, build worlds, and create adventures for thousands of players around the globe. If you've ever imagined being a wizard, a space explorer, or the hero of your own story, well, today's guest is someone who actually builds those worlds for the people to play in. He's the founder of Wandering Pine Press, a story-driven tabletop role-playing game studio, and a game designer whose projects have been backed by thousands of fans on Kickstarter. So please welcome the one, the only, the amazing, the world-building wizard himself, Brian Hazzard!
Thank you so much, Tiberius. I don't know if I've ever had such an enthusiastic introduction, but I have to correct you on one thing. The dragons are chasing me.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. So, Brian, you're a game designer and founder of Wandering Pine Press. So, for kids listening who have no idea what that means, what exactly do you do?
Well, the reality is I have to do all kinds of things beyond just designing games. But, I'll start high level here and just say I make games that help people create stories and explore immersive worlds.
Alright. So, when someone says tabletop role-playing game, what does that mean in real life?
That's a good question. It can mean a lot of different things, but usually it means a game or even just an activity, you might say, where one person is describing what's happening in a world, and other players are describing what their character that they are playing are doing. And then occasionally, when something comes up in the story where success is not guaranteed, you roll the dice and see what happens, and it can either go really well or really bad or somewhere in between.
Alright, so are you basically like the person who invents the rules for how, like, imagination works?
That's yeah, I think you could say that. It's 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 a way. How do I think about this? I think that I make rules that help people imagine in a way that is collaborative, right? So when you have a whole bunch of different minds together wanting to tell a cohesive story, it's quite possible that you might end up with sort of conflict about where the story should go or what kind of story you want to tell. But the kinds of game systems that I make, help get everybody on the same page and sort of following a shared logic for how to decide where the story goes. But I like to think about it too as a game designer making this particular kind of game. I'm sort of collaborating with the players to author interesting stories.
So what types of, like, games did you grow up playing? Like Dungeons and Dragons or something?
You know, you might be surprised to know that although I have played at this point learned and played hundreds of role-playing games. I've only actually ever played Dungeons and Dragons, the most popular role-playing game, one time in my life. So I've played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons adjacent things, but I tend to be drawn to more sort of small press indie games that focus on the storytelling and less on the sort of tactical combat aspects of things. Yeah.
So when did you first realize, wait, I could actually make these games?
Well, I think I've always been creating worlds and telling stories kind of in my head. And I've had several attempts throughout my life to kind of like write those things down as stories rather than as games. And they always kind of came up short or didn't end up the way I wanted them to be. And at some point, it wasn't that long ago. It was maybe, I'm thinking back, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago that I was playing games or rather purchasing games and playing them from a site called itch.io, which has a lot of those indie. Yeah, you know them for indie video games probably. There's a category on there called physical games. You can, if you browse the physical games category, there's a lot of indie TTRPGs on there. Mm-hmm. And they also have something that they call game jams. And
I've participated in one.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. One particular game jam called the One Page RPG Game Jam gave me my start, where it was something that was accessible, something that I could kind of see myself actually completing. And so that's really where I started, was participating in game jams, especially for smaller games.
All right. Well, now here's something really interesting. You spent almost 15 years working in tech as a software developer and project manager. And you were making multi-six-figure income, which sounds like a lot of gold coins in RPG terms. So what made you walk away from that?
Well, it was several things. First of all, my wife and I, who is my partner, obviously, in life, but also in this business, she's very much an equal contributor to Wandering Pine Press. But we've always had a dream, a vision of exploring the country together, and once we had kids with our 2 sons. And so that's always been kind of calling out to us. Also, I have always been I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. I've hosted events, for example, called Startup Weekends, where people come together and make a startup in one weekend, and they're judged not just on the concept, but by whether they're able to get customers and that sort of thing. So I've always had an interest in entrepreneurship. So all of that is kind of like background, and there's been this itch, but then also last year, the company I was working for suddenly shut down, right? So I found myself, and this was not the first time. There was a few years before that, 3 or 4 years before that, I had gone through a round of layoffs. This is just a thing in almost into any industry, but technology in particular, there's a lot of volatility, right? And anyway, so this most recent time when the company shut down, I was at a crossroads of how much of my time do I put towards trying to get the next gig, and how much of my time do I put towards creative efforts. And I just thought this was a chance. The world was sort of telling me, like, hey, let's give it a go. So here I am.
So do you see similarities between programming and storytelling?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because there's a lot of procedural elements to RPGs in particular. There's also procedural elements to crafting stories. There's things like The hero's journey is a well-known one that if anybody is a writer, they probably know what the hero's journey is. But it's basically, you know, a series of steps that you take. And many of the greatest stories ever told follow this framework, whether they initially set out to do so or not. You know, dating back to like Odysseus and like really, you know, old stories. So yeah, the procedural aspect of thinking through how things fit together is definitely related. They're not, it's certainly not exactly the same, but there's also one other thing I'll say is programming, people think of it as building new things. The reality of it is that most of it is fixing broken things. And the same can be true about writing stories or creating games. Like every small change ripples out and ends up affecting other things. And you end up having to spend a lot of your time, you know, just making it all work together as a cohesive whole.
All right, so now you've had thousands of people back your project on Kickstarter. What was it like, you know, launching your very first campaign?
Oh, that was kind of a surprise. And actually, if I kind of go back to your question of when I started designing games, I think maybe this is another angle on that. When I hit go on that, I didn't really know what to expect. I had been running a podcast for a while about a genre of interactive fiction called game books. These are, if anybody's familiar with things like Lone Wolf or fighting fantasy or Fabled Lands or anything like that. And so what ended up happening was a lot of the people who were kind of aware of me and supportive of me because of that ended up sort of backing the campaign. And I didn't expect it because one of the things that's true about a podcast, this was an audio-only podcast. One of the things that's true about an audio-only podcast is that you don't necessarily know who's listening. You know, it's not like on YouTube or a stream where you might have live viewers or comments or things like that. So it was a surprise to me that I had so many people who would want to support my work. And it also was the thing that gave me the confidence to give it a shot when my company shut down last year.
So what is something that would surprise people about your work?
I think that maybe when people think of role playing, inevitably they think of Dungeons and Dragons first, and or Pathfinder maybe, or possibly like Call of Cthulhu or, you know, something like that. Those are kind of the big three. And so it's generally very fantasy heavy and that sort of thing. And I have created some fantasy games. So, you know, there's definitely an appeal to that. But I also really like exploring all kinds of different genres. Everything from, you know, sort of science fiction, I'm a big Star Trek fan, to pulp noir, to you know, westerns even, you know, that sort of thing. So I think maybe it would just be that that there's a wide variety of games that you can play, even just within one small publisher like mine, and not to mention the whole sort of world of indie games. And then another thing would be that I think people think a lot about sort of the tactical simulation and all of that sort of thing, which is, you know, very popular for, I like that kind of stuff too, actually. It's really fun. But my games tend to be very narratively focused and more almost about coming together as a group and like creating a novel or something like that, right? You're not literally creating a novel, but it kind of can feel that way, that you've walked away with a really satisfying story, and the dice kind of almost disappear. Like you're rolling them, but they don't really feature as the main component, if that makes sense.
All right. Well, here seems like a good time to take a quick commercial break. Let's hear a word from our sponsors.
So you want to make an ad for your company, right?
Yeah, Tiberius, you want to help me?
Okay, so what's the name of the company?
PPWND.
PP what?
Professional Pressure Washing and Detailing.
So you like clean driveways?
Yeah, like that. We pressure wash commercial buildings and semi-truck and trailers.
So how would someone get a hold of you?
They can visit my site at ppwnd.com or call me at 407-900-7793.
So I just tell them to call you at 407-900-7793 or visit ppwnd.com?
Yeah, Tiberius, you got it.
Cut! That's a wrap! Just use that!
Oak Ridge Gun Range is a family-oriented shooting range that has been in business for over 30 years. They specialize in basic firearm training and offer numerous services such as consignments, gun trades, gunsmithing, and concealed weapon classes. I even got my training for gun safety at Oak Ridge Gun Range. Great customer service, and firearm safety is what they do best. So find out more at oakridgegunrange.com.
And we're back here with Brian Hazzard, game designer, world builder, and corporate escape artist. Alright, so Brian, let's talk creativity for a minute. Where do your ideas come from?
Oh man, I spent a long time trying to be original, and I have recently embraced ripping people off. So no, and I say that and people are probably like, what? But what I've come to realize is that a lot of the best works actually come from people's failure to emulate their creative heroes, right? So when you try to make a clone of something you love, inevitably it's not going to be the same thing. It's going to end up being its own thing because you can't help but put your own spin on it. So for example, I've recently made a game called Terminus X7Z, and it started as a ripoff of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Just wholesale, the foundational premise is obviously Star Trek Deep Space Nine with the serial numbers, shaved off because you've got a space station with a wormhole next to it, right? That's where I started. But of course, I wasn't going to literally put the same characters in or anything like that. So as soon as you have different characters and different species and all of a sudden different political dynamics and all sorts of things come into it. And before you know it, you've got something that is almost unrecognizable from the source material, except for something very obvious that it shares in common, which is that space station and the wormhole, right?
Well, do you start with the story first or rules first?
It's kind of maybe a combination of the two, because what I usually do is I'll start with a sort of small, very simple system. And so like a single dice roll mechanic, and so this is how I'm going to resolve any kind of action in the game. But then I will focus most of my effort on the setting, because there are so many great systems out there, and I'm not going to make the next Dungeons and Dragons. It would be foolish for me to think that I'm going to do that. But I can make a setting that for a group of people, speaks to them and is sort of the type of place that they want to explore, right? So I spend most of my effort there, and then I come back and think about the mechanics again to see if, okay, now that I've got the setting in place, is there any tweaks to the system that I should be making to better tell the kinds of stories that this setting should tell?
So how do you balance making a game simple enough for new players, but deep enough for experienced ones?
It is a tricky thing, and this isn't exactly what you're asking here, but just as an example, I'm working on a book right now that I was sort of struggling with to what extent the book should focus on being a good learning material versus being a good at the table reference. They're kind of different needs, right? Like, but anyway, as far as new players versus experienced players, I do tend to focus on more singular experiences where you'll play like a short session, a short campaign, so 3 to 5, 3 to 5 sessions or something like that, rather than on trying to do a big sprawling, you're going to be playing this for 30 years kind of thing. But that said, again, for me, it's more about making sure there's enough variety of setting material than on making sure the mechanics are deep. I'm more interested in giving you a lot of narrative potential to explore than I am in system mastery.
Well, do your kids like ever test your games? And I mean, you can always send some to me, to test sometime.
I'd be happy to, actually. I could send you some games after this. So my kids are currently 6 and 9 years old, and so they've just sort of started to get to the age where they have an interest. And so I have played with them some. However, they are more interested in like a 30-minute to an hour and a half type of experience, and less interested in a 3-hour session or something like that.
They'll get used to it.
The way that we play is certainly different than the way that I play with other adults. Yeah,
like a mini story instead of a whole movie.
Yep, exactly.
So what is it like, building a company with your wife? I mean, do you two like ever disagree about like creative decisions or something?
My wife is always right. And no, I say that somewhat facetiously, but also we're very different people. And so, yeah, we definitely do disagree. However, we actually started dating in high school. We were 15 when we started dating. I'm now 40. I'm not going to do the math in my head because I'm terrible at arithmetic. But so we've been together for a very long time, and we have learned how to deal with disagreements. My wife tends to be the practical, down-to-earth, deliberate, and disciplined person, and I tend to be the chaos factor, more creatively driven. I have a lot of hobbies, and they're on rotation. Here's a crazy example. This will give you an example of why I need a disciplined, stable human in my life to help me. I recently was very interested in magic. Not Magic the Gathering, magic like tricks and stuff like that.
It's like a card popping out of your hand?
Yeah, that sort of stuff. But in the course of about a year, I acquired over 100 magic books, books about magic tricks and things like that. And in hindsight, like now that I'm making some life changes and things like that, what am I going to do with 100 magic books? So anyway.
Yeah, maybe. All right, so you said that you're also preparing for a full-time RV, living with your family. Are you going to design games about traveling the country or while you're doing it?
Yeah, so definitely we'll be designing games while on the road. In fact, the RV lifestyle is one that we want to do primarily because it's something that we've sort of dreamed about for quite a while. But there is an economic factor to it. Like the dirty secret is that RPGs don't make as much money as I was making in my corporate career, and I don't anticipate that they will unless I luck out and just get a surprise hit or something like that. But I'm not counting on that. And so the RV lifestyle is very much part of this, giving me like extended runway so that on a significantly smaller income, I can still live happily and not, cause problems for my family. So, and then as far as the other part of that question, will I design games about being on the road? That actually is something that my wife and I have talked about. We obviously need to make sure that it's something that people can relate to. So I don't want to design a game that's like too autobiographical to the point where it like doesn't mean anything to anyone else. But I have actually played some games that are kind of about like traveling around the country. So, I've got some ideas. We'll see.
Yeah, I have like an idea is like you're driving with your party and then a bunch of other cars come around and start to attack you at the same time and they have to attack back. Or then it's oh, you stop in a small little city. Hi, how are you today?
I sure hope that that doesn't happen in my real life. Mad Max, like my RV trip turns out to be a Mad Max experience.
Mad Max movie. Car flips over on a ramp.
I will say though, one little funny surprise. I don't know that this is a game I want to surprise, but or that I want to design, but there are a number of games that are often called slice of life games, which are about things that are kind of mundane, like running a coffee shop, right? In fact, there's a game I won't name it right now, but there is a game on Kickstarter at the moment that is literally about running a coffee shop.
Kickstarter running a coffee shop. Okay.
When I last checked it, it had raised like over $300,000 or something like that. So there's an appetite for it.
Hey, after the show, you're probably gonna have to tell me that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna want to see that. All right. So, what advice would you give to a teen who wants to create their own game someday?
I would say start now, but also start small, right? So I started with little one-page games, and it's actually shocking how much game you can get out of a single page, right? So if you set out to make the next Dungeons and Dragons, you're probably not going to succeed, right?
No.
Especially on your first go, right? But if you set out to like, okay, basically give yourself constraints, right? For example, I'm going to make a game that is going to be exactly one page, maybe as much as page front and back, right? And I'm only going to allow myself a single D6, right? Like that's the mechanics. It is more likely that you'll create something interesting than if you set out with no constraints in place, right? And just like, I'm just going to let my imagination run wild and we'll see what happens, because you probably won't finish it, right? And this is something I learned from software development. In software, there's a principle of having software that is always shippable, meaning anytime that you make a change to the software, you should make sure that you never put it into a broken state. Like every single change, boom, now the software still works. So at any moment, you could hit the go button and boom, you've shipped the changes, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, I think the same is true. This is a hard-learned lesson. I didn't realize this at first. You should do the same if you're making a game or any other creative thing, because otherwise, you create like half-done things, and done is always better than perfect.
Half done. Well, on that note, you know what? Let's take another quick break just to pay some bills.
Mm-hmm.
The Tiberius Show would like to thank one of their dedicated sponsors, Custom Designs Orlando. These guys are on Mills Avenue and do all sorts of stuff, ranging from photo ID badges, engraved signs, custom braille ADA signs, vinyl lettering to trophies and awards. The cool part about Custom Designs is they can ship products all over the United States. You can reach them at 407-898-0373 and tell them that
Tiberius
sent you.
Over 40 years, they Lighthouse Central Florida has provided education, independent life skills, and job training to thousands of Central Floridians who live with blindness or any degree of vision loss. Whether it's picking out clothes in the morning or just moving around your community and serving Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties. Contact Lighthouse Central Florida at 407-898-2483 or visit them online at lighthousecfl.org.
And we're back here with the incredible Brian Hazzard, storyteller, designer, and family adventurer. So Brian, your games have been selected for RPG anthologies and covered by gaming journalists. What does it feel like to see your name in print like that?
Yeah, it's really gratifying to hold something that you've done kind of in your hands, and especially when you're working with others and others have contributed like that. It's yeah, I don't know what to say other than it's really fun to you know what, I'm gonna actually harp on what I said just before the break and say that feeling of accomplishment is only possible if you hold yourself to a standard of finishing things, right? And it can be hard to do. So yeah, I think it's also that if you wanna be able to have that great feeling of completing something and holding it in your hands, focus on the completing part of it.
All right, so out of all the games that you've made, which one are you most proud of?
Ooh, they're all my babies. I don't know. So, usually it's the one that I most recently completed, and also usually my least favorite is the one I'm currently working on. So it like flips. As soon as I'm done, it's
like
my favorite. But while I'm working on it, it's
Like,
terrible. Yeah, exactly.
So, do you still like play as a player, or are you always the designer now?
Well, yeah. I actually like indie games a lot, and I like games that work really well for like one session and you're done. I don't tend to get involved in big sprawling campaigns anymore because I like to explore systems. So there's an aspect to, yes, I play a lot of indie RPGs, and I'm actually currently working on playing them even more frequently, and like playing them on my YouTube channel and things like that, right? But there is always an aspect of like, sometimes the reason I'm playing a game is to learn from it as a designer, and less because I'm playing it as a player. But I usually end up having a lot of fun as a player in those experiences.
So, when you're not working, what do you like to do for fun?
So I am a serial hobbyist. I collect hobbies the way that some people have hobbies of collecting. So usually it's, collecting games, collecting magic stuff, right? I would say, just generally speaking, I'm a collector of information and knowledge.
The collector of collectors.
The collector of collectors. Yeah, I'm the person who often has some kind of super random fact that really should not be saved in my brain. There's something more useful that I could know. But for some reason, I know all about this esoteric and useless thing.
So you said you played a lot of indie games. So do you play any video games, sort of like the indie games, or what's your favorite one?
So on the RPG side, one of my favorite games is a relatively popular indie game called Ironsworn, and there's a sequel to it that I like even better called Starsworn. These are actually solo. Some people don't even know this exists or think it sounds kind of like super weird and whatever, but they can be played solo or GM-less. Those are you can play it with somebody to facilitate, like a dungeon master in D&D, right? but I tend to prefer to play GM-less when I'm playing with others or solo. And it just means that you're sharing the role of doing the GMing and sort of describing what's happening in the world. On the video game side, I don't tend to play a lot of video games because my sons hog the, the system. But I will say that there is a classic game series that started in 1985, the year of my birth, which is the Mega Man series. And it's a side-scrolling platformer game that's very like timing sensitive, sort of Twitch reaction type stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I always loved it as a kid. And recently my my 6-year-old got obsessed with it because of, interestingly enough, a comic book series that was produced about it by Archie Comics in, I don't know, sometime in the 2000s. And recently there's another a publisher called Udon Comics that has picked it up and started making comics again. But anyway, he got obsessed with the Mega Man character and world through that comic book series. And then because of that started playing the game. Now, if you've played any of those games, you know that they are extremely hard and unforgiving games where if you even so much as touch, you know, a spike pixel, you know, boom, you're dead, you know?
Yeah.
And so what I have really enjoyed watching is he gets so frustrated and he asks me like, Daddy, can you just do this for me? You know? And at first I did, you know, because he started playing these when he was like 4 years old, but I've more recently started refusing and sort of coaching him through and saying like, you know, it seems like maybe you're missing this skill. Like you need to be able to shoot while your character is up in the air, you know, that sort of thing. And so, you know, he'll practice that. And then he'll go do it again and he'll fail for some other reason. It's like, you need to be able to slide under the boss, you know, like that sort of thing.
Like slide under while attacking.
Exactly, yeah. And then when he finally gets it, he's so proud that he's overcome an impossible challenge. And that for me is video games at their best.
So what was the biggest mistake that you've ever made and how did it change you as a person?
Oh, gosh. The biggest mistake I ever made. We're about to get deep. You know, I think that my answer to this would have changed so many times throughout my life. But being that I am now, 40 years old, recently turned 40, and squarely in what people call the midlife crisis, I think that my biggest mistake is that I spent a lot of time doing what is expected and trying to work for like stability and safety rather than pursuing what really excites me in life. Because when this is maybe a little depressing, sorry if I bring all of the listeners down, but when you turn 40, you do start thinking about like how finite life is, and that money is money, and it's important. You need it, but it isn't everything, and time is not something you can get back. So I think I probably would have done what I'm doing now earlier in my life.
All right. Now, can you tell me that one story? You know, remember, this is a kid's show, but that one story, well, that you're not supposed to tell me about. Come on, you can tell me. I won't tell anyone.
Story I'm not supposed to tell you about. Ooh, that's a tough one. You know, I missed out on a job once because I was a little too honest on a job interview. So this was when I was very young and I had a lot of lessons still to learn. But it was, I think it was interesting because it actually made me reflect and really changed things for me in a big way. But basically, when I was very young, I did steal something from a job. And at the time, it was one of those, they're not using it. Like, they don't need it. I was very into music. This was an audio interface, right? And so I'm like, this will help me do what I want to do, that sort of thing. And then I was in a job interview. This was, a couple of years down the road. And the question came up, and they said, have you ever taken something from an employer, right? Without.
And you answered honestly?
I learned a couple of things about myself. The first was that I cannot bald-faced lie to someone, like, convincingly. So I told them, yes, I have, and I did not get that job.
I mean, you kind of told them that you were probably going to steal something from them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, fair enough, right? Well, I realized a couple things. First of all, I hadn't thought about that interface that I'd taken for a while, and I realized that, one, it really wasn't worth sort of sacrificing my honesty as a person to have taken that, right? So I felt bad about that. I also learned that the whole idea of what they don't know won't hurt them is not true, because it may not hurt the person, right? But it will hurt you. So I think that did teach me some things, and I can't believe you made me say that on air.
Well, we didn't make you. You chose it.
Yeah,
but you know
fair
what?
enough.
Is there anything else you think my listeners should know about you and, like, what you do?
I think that people should know that if they've ever been interested in playing role-playing games, but the complexity of a multiple 100-page book is, intimidating to them, and so they don't think they'll ever kind of be able to bring it to the table, head on over to wanderingpinepress.com, and we've got some small games, including some of those one-page games that I was referring to at very low prices, and we've got some they tend to graduate into, if you like the game, you can kind of get the expanded version of it that is a whole book. So yeah.
Which brings me to my next question. Do you have, like, a website or social media for my listeners that want to follow you? So what is your social media?
Most places I am Wandering Pine Press, and some places I am Wandering Pine Games. So search those two on YouTube, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Am I forgetting any others? Oh, and Facebook. Yeah, I'm on all of those. And then, of course, if you want to check out the website, wanderingpinepress.com.
I was going to say, you said Blue Sky in front of Facebook. I was like, huh?
Yeah,
All right. So, like, what's that one question that you think I forgot to ask you?
I don't know. What's your favorite color? I'm just kidding. I don't have a favorite color. So.
Well, you answered the question yourself. Well, thank you, Brian, for being my special guest. Can you stick around for Math Corners?
I'd love to.
Sweet.
Aw, Dad, my computer's slow again and I can't play my games.
Call Your Computer Solutions today, and we will scan for viruses and clean that computer up remotely and make it fast again. Our phone number is 407-826-0810.
Thanks, Dad. My computer's fast again. Now I can do my homework. Thanks for calling Your Computer Solutions at 407-826-0810.
Tiberius' favorite subject, it's Math Corners!
Alright, you know what? Thank you, Brian, for helping me with Math Corners. And this week, we're some more multi-step word problems. My dad's always going to find new problems for me to solve, and today, we're going to talk about probability and rolling a 6-sided dice in an RPG game. So, since you design tabletop role-playing games, at Wandering Pine Press, I think that this one might be right up your alley. Maybe. That's maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, in a tabletop RPG game, a player needs to roll a 6 to defeat a dragon. He gets 3 chances to roll a standard 6-sided die. The question is, what is the probability that he rolls at least 1 6 in those 3 tries?
Ooh, I love it. Do you want me to figure this out?
Nah, I mean, I got it. Well, you know, first, this is a real-world problem, because when someone like you designs a game, you have to think about the odds behind every single challenge. If the dragon is too easy to defeat, the story isn't exciting. If it's almost impossible, players get frustrated. So probability helps balance the fun. So, to solve this, we start by figuring out the probability of not rolling a 6 on a single roll. A standard die has 6 sides, and only one of those sides is a 6. That means 5 out of the 6 sides are not a 6. So the probability of not rolling a 6 on one roll is 5 over 6. So since the player gets 3 independent rolls, we multiply that probability 3 times. So 5 over 6 times 5 over 6 times 5 over 6. We multiply the numerators, 5 times 5 times 5. We get 125. And we multiply the denominators, we get 216. So the probability of not rolling a single 6 in 3 tries is 125 out of 216. Now, to find the probability of rolling at least 1 6, we subtract that from 1. So 1 whole is the same as 216 out of 216. So when we subtract the 195 from 216, we get 91. So the probability of rolling at least 1 6 in 3 tries is 91 out of 216. That's a little over 42%. So even with 3 chances, it's still less than a 50-50 shot to defeat that dragon. Which means in a real RPG game, players might need like teamwork, strategy, or maybe a backup plan. And that was a lot of math.
Yeah, indeed. And you know, I've actually played some games, I can't remember the name of it right now, where the system works that way, where your strength is the number of dice you roll, and you only get a hit if you get a 6.
Well, Brian, when you design your games, do you carefully calculate like probabilities, like to keep things fair and exciting?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the game. Sometimes less so. And in fact, I've found that for shorter game situations, sometimes the probabilities don't necessarily matter, right? Like, because, and the reason I say that, that's like anathema, right? Is because the probabilities like present themselves when you roll a whole lot of times, then it starts to normalize at whatever the probability is. But if you roll a few times, right? So let's say you're playing a game session that's an hour long or something like that, and you only roll 4 or 5 times, well, then it's kind of all over the place and unpredictable, and it's unlikely to actually map to that curve at all. So it depends on the game and what the intention of it is. Like, is my intention that you're going to play a super long campaign, which I do have games like that, then yes, in those situations, I make sure that I understand the sort of probability curves and things. There are also situations where I have people roll not for action resolution, but for like a prompt, right, that helps them creatively. And you do have to think about things like, if you want things to have equal odds of happening, you don't, for example, want people to like sum the roll of 2 dice, right? Because obviously that's going to create a bell curve and things are going to be more likely than others. So yeah, it comes up quite a bit, but it all depends on the type of game that you're designing.
Well, there's something that I always say to me and my friends, and it's something that I live by every single time. Every probability in my life is 50-50. You do it or you don't.
I like it.
50-50.
That is good.
Either you get it or you don't get it.
Yep.
Well, my teacher said that I would use math every single day. How do you use probability when building your RPG worlds?
Yeah. So it's all about like the system. So when I said earlier that I usually start with some very simple core system, that is the moment where I'm spending the most time thinking about the probabilities. So I'll think about like kind of what are the curves, and when I say curve, I mean, are there certain results that are more likely to happen than others? And then I think about the experience that I want players to have. So for example, I want to avoid players succeeding too often, because success isn't that interesting, right? But I also don't. I want to avoid 100% of the time. I want to avoid what I call the null result, which is, oh, nothing happens, right? And so generally, what I'll try to do in my game is make sure that well over 50% of the time, people are either going to succeed with a complication or fail with a complication. And only sometimes do they succeed without a complication.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for your help with Math Corners.
You're welcome. It was fun.
And now it's time for the Heart of a Lion. As you know, we talk about the qualities of living by the Heart of a Lion, which stands for leadership, integrity, obedience, and ability. Well, this week, we're going to talk about integrity. For me, I think integrity is doing what is right, even when no one else is looking. Qualities of integrity is honesty, sincerity, truthfulness, and fairness. So, the other day, I was at a board game party with some friends. There were snacks everywhere, dice rolling, cards flying. It was a serious competition. And we were playing a strategy game where you earn points for completing secret objectives. Now, in this game, you keep your objective card hidden. And when you complete it, you reveal it and score the points. Well, one of the players thought he had completed his objective and started to count the points. It would have put him in the lead. But everyone was kind of looking around like, okay, I guess that works. But then he stopped. He looked at the card again. He reread it. And then he said, wait, I actually needed one more piece to complete this. I didn't earn these points yet. Now, here's the thing. Nobody else had noticed. He could have stayed quiet. He could have taken the points. The game would have kept moving. But he didn't. He put the points back. The whole mood of the table changed. Not because it was dramatic, but because it mattered. He showed integrity. He chose honesty over, winning. And later, he actually did complete the objective the right way. And nobody questioned it for a second. Here's the thing. Board games are supposed to be fun, but they also show character. When you roll dice or flip cards, you're not just playing a game. You're showing who you are. So integrity isn't just about big moments. It's about small decisions. It's about choosing fairness when you could choose advantage. It's about being trustworthy even when no one is checking. You don't have to be at a board game party to show integrity. You can show it on a test, on the field, a group project, at home when your parents aren't in the room. And don't forget that you can be lion strong. So Brian, have you ever seen integrity show up during a game night?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because RPGs are a little different from some other games in that there's a guiding principle called rule of cool, which is just that you can ignore some rules if everyone at the table agrees, and you're ignoring the rule allows you to like do the more fun thing, right? However, you do default to following the game rules if there's any kind of disagreement at all. And generally speaking, people in RPGs have a tendency to like subject their characters to the worst possible situations because it's just more fun, right? But yeah, obviously you could always sort of just constantly be invoking the rule of cool and say like, it'd be so much cooler if I just, one hit this dragon. Let's move on or something like that. But it's not nearly as satisfying, right? So absolutely, it comes up all the time.
Rule of cool, you seduce the dragon.
Yeah. I also couldn't help but laugh because we talked about integrity right after my funny story. Funny, not haha. But I do think that it's appropriate, though, to this subject because I think integrity is something that can be innate, but sometimes it has to be learned as well, right? Like by you experience the pain of what happens when you act without integrity, right? And I think, my story illustrates that. I missed out on a job. I also felt shame about that. So yeah, it's good to learn our lesson when we do act without integrity and make amends.
Well, we should always try to be lion strong in everything we do, shouldn't we?
Absolutely.
And that's our show, folks. I want to thank the one, the only, the amazing Brian Hazzard for being on my show. It has been so much fun talking to you today. I think we learned a lot about your work as a role-playing game designer and publisher.
Thank you so much. I've had a blast talking to you.
No problem. And do you mind giving your social media website again for my listeners that actually want to play board games?
Absolutely. So it's Wandering Pine Press on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And if you can't find us with Wandering Pine Press, use Wandering Pine Games. And our website is wanderingpinepress.com.
All right. Well, also, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Tiberius Show. And I would like to thank WWPR 1490 AM, Canton 98, Soul Radio 24/7, EZUA TV, and all the other stations that air my show. And please be sure to visit The Tiberius Show on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. So, Brian, are you subscribed yet?
I am.
Ah, see, he knows how to do it. He knows. So, OBM615 says, I can relate 1000%, Brohim. I'm guessing that was to the guest. And Mr. Relics Galactic, or Mr. Elixir Galactic, says, I love action parks. Well, thanks, Mr. Elixir Galactic, whatever the name is. I'm told that I'll be interviewing you soon, apparently. I have no idea who that is, but I'm guessing I'm going to be interviewing them soon. Well, be sure to leave a comment on my videos, and I might even mention yours at the end of the show. And also, be sure to join us next Tiberius Show with your host, Tiberius Boy.